Hey, how you doing? This is Adam Post, publisher of more than 1,000 comic books. Today we're talking about DC Comics at risk. Everyone thought there were going to be layoffs last week at DC Comics. There were not layoffs at DC Comics. ICV2, who's got some pretty good information and some pretty good contacts, was saying DC is at risk from more layoffs from Warner Brothers Discovery. Because Zaslav hasn't gotten his hands on Warner Brothers Discovery's DC Comics unit yet. We haven't really seen any big announcements related to them as far as new hires or as far as layoffs. You heard, Joe Quesada is doing some work for DC Comics now, and Mark Silvestri. You got the Spawn Batman coming out. But that's not management. That's not publishing strategy. That's not business strategy. What we did see happen was there were massive layoffs in Warner Brothers TV. 26% of all the staff of Warner Brothers TV, 1 out of 4 people, gonzo, out of there. Because they weren't doing a good job, but they didn't fit with strategy. It's not what they want to do. They don't have the budget for the head count that they want to allocate to it. That's that. But even bigger news inside of the animation division was Cartoon Network Studios losing all of its authority to greenlight and do any projects that they want to do. All of that's now been merged into Warner Brothers Animation with one single management structure and, total accountability to Zaslav to decide what, will and won't be made through whoever his head is now at Warner Brothers Animation. That was major. That could mean that anything could happen to DC Comics. Literally anything. Now, when I say anything, I don't mean them licensing their comics out. I know Marvel has licensed their comics out to IDW. They have some manga versions with Viz that they've done. Interestingly, Webtoon is doing Marvel and DC comics as well. So they've got their own versions of Marvel and DC comics. That's a license. They get paid for that. I just don't think that there's any chance that Warner Brothers Discovery is going to stop publishing their own comics directly, because they need to control that. They need to control how many comics are coming out, what the formats are, the creative relationships with the creators. I think they will redo how they do a lot of the comics, but not so foreign or drastically from what you'd expect. I think they just want the stuff to be good sellers and be on brand. That's the most important thing. Let's take a look at this article, even though the layoffs at DC that were anticipated didn't happen. Before we do, please be sure to subscribe to the channel. Click the bell for notifications. Give me a thumbs up. It's a huge help. I really appreciate it. The channel's doing great. I really do appreciate it. It's been fantastic. Layoffs hitting at Warner Brothers Discovery. Okay, so this article talks about how, yes, 26% of the workforce for Warner Brothers Discovery's animation and TV unit, Warner Brothers TV, were cut. 26% is such a high number of staff. It's I talk about it, I'm like, it's almost like we're just firing all of you. It's not a small amount. You're not giving people a chance to show what they can do. The attitude is, hey, we looked at the numbers. We know what you can do. It's not good. It's not good. So we appreciate the contributions to date. However, we need to let you go. And so they did. But, there's a cost savings issue to this. So as the article says, Warner Bros. Discovery's CEO is looking to find a promised $3 billion in post-merger cost savings. So $3 billion in cost savings is supposed to be because of the merger. They have crossover of some of their operations. They don't need all this extra real estate. They don't need all these employees. For example, HBO Max had a lot of technical engineers producing their back-end programming and stuff. And Discovery was planning to hire and find engineers. Well, HBO Max has so damn many that they don't need to go and hire people over at Discovery to do that. So there are all kinds of opportunities like that where, okay, they can combine operations and save money. $1 billion has already been found. CFO Gunnar Wiedenfeld's already said in their quarterly report back in June that they'd already found $1 billion worth of run rate savings, which means cutting their overhead every year by $1 billion has already been discovered. And that doesn't mean canceling Batgirl or other TV shows. It doesn't mean pulling Infinity Train or canceling other animated series. That means they know what the operations are, they know where the revenue comes from, and they know if they make certain changes, it's not going to impact revenue. So they can pull $1 billion in cost savings out of their overhead structure. That's very substantial. They're going in and they're looking for more savings. So while Zaslav has not implemented a new strategy for DC and DC-based content at the company, not yet. As long ago as April, shortly after Warner Bros. Discovery merger closed, Zaslav was reported to be considering a reorganization that would make DC its own content vertical. Now, this is what they mean by its own content vertical. DC reorg in the works, Nimona at Netflix. Okay. So Warner Bros. Discovery CEO is contemplating a reorganization that would make DC its own content vertical, according to Variety. Zaslav sees maximizing the success of DC-based entertainment as key to making the merger successful, according to the report. He sees some franchise characters, such as Superman, as in need of revitalization. Well, I guess that's partly why he didn't like gay Superman. And big opportunities in media around second-build characters such as Joker and Harley Quinn. Top executives from Warner Media exited as the merger closed, so the decks are cleared for a reorganization. Perhaps an increased focus on DC-based entertainment will make Zaslav merciful on the publishing company as the newly merged companies undertake their $3 billion in cost savings. So it's not about mercy. It's about creating a coherent structure so that their management team knows that they're always looking for the same success. So if they take one department, whether it's Warner Brothers TV or it's the comics publishing division or it's something in theatrical, everything is held to the same accountability. Not the same potential for profit, but the same rules in terms of producing nourishing, high-quality, branded content that can be resold in multiple platforms for as long as possible. That's what Discovery was, a global IP company. That is what Warner Media is being fixed to do. And they will do anything to make that happen. They don't care. Whatever it takes, they're willing to do it. That includes firing, that includes laying off, that includes hiring, that includes investments. But they're not going to go ahead and say, we're going to take mercy on this division or that division. It's not about mercy. And as they say here in the article, regardless of the new organization, it's hard to see how DC could take more staff cuts. It lost 1/3 of its editorial staff and many others, including sales and marketing staff, in multiple rounds of brutal cuts under then-owner AT&T in 2020. Now, the cuts in 2020 were like historic. They were amazing. I mean, they cut a lot of people. Warner Media laid off like 1,500 more people after they had laid off people before that. A lot of people. You know, Warner Media has roughly 30,000 employees. Zaslav hasn't laid off, 5,000 people or anything like that, or 1,500 people. We'll see what else they do. I mean, because everyone seems to think they're going to lay off tons of people. But, maybe they're right. Maybe there's just not that many left to lay off. In sales, they laid off 100 people out of 3,000, although they've said they may be laying off as many as 1,000 of people in sales. Those salespeople are not involved in comics. They sell the advertising for Warner Media's cable channels. So there will be more layoffs for sure. But there is one thing we do know, and we know it for sure, because DC has gone out of their way to make a big announcement that DC Universe Infinite Ultra is going to be a substantial business for them, at least for the comics. And I almost think this looks to them like this could be their primary business for the comics, and that everything else will be other distribution channels. They have no problem with coming up with a focus for something and then saying, listen, our primary window market, because this is what they do with theatrical, and this is what they want to do with theatrical. Zaslav and his team has said they're not going to just take a movie and put it out on their streaming service. and say, hey, subscribe to our streaming service because we've got this one new movie. They're not doing that. They will have theatrical films on their streaming service, but they first expect to release them in a theatrical market. And then they'll have multiple windows of where the films will be sold, and then ultimately they will make it onto their streaming service, and they'll get revenue and they'll get paid again and again and again and again. They've been incredibly successful with this with Discovery prior to the merger. The reason they're in a position to do this deal with Warner Media and to merge like this and take control of this entire operation is because they were so successful with how they structured creating content on essentially a low-cost basis, keeping the quality high, and then selling it into multiple countries and multiple markets. So they're all about exploiting distribution. So DC Infinite Ultra is the DC direct-to-consumer app where they sell subscriptions every month to access DC's comic library. Not other publishers, just DC's. So they have exclusive distribution this way. And I know a lot of people don't like digital comics. They think that digital comics are fake, or they just don't prefer them to paper. I prefer paper comics to a digital comic. I've read a few digital comics, but I've read like pretty much everything I read is paper. But there are people that really like them. And what's more is with the direct-to-consumer relationship, they're able to expand on it as much as they want to. But they can cross-promote this with films, with TV, with their unlimited number of cable channels in multiple countries. They have so much resources that they can just pop this next to. They have 92 million subscribers for HBO Max right now. So might they have a free offer if you have children or something to give you a free comic app or some offer? They're very slick with their marketing. They're very, very sophisticated. They'll figure it out. But this is a focus for them because they can control the distribution and because it's proprietary. I'll bet you, as much as it sounds like, oh my God, how could you say a thing like that? I'll bet you the comics are going to get reorganized at DC to support their direct-to-consumer distribution, this DC Universe Infinite Ultra. You can tell me what you think in the comments below. I'd love to see what you have to say about that. But this is something they can control and they can scale and they can get a lot of information about with their characters. If there's a character that gets a lot more action than they thought might, maybe Poison Ivy winds up getting a lot of activity. Maybe Black Adam is going to get a lot of people going for Black Adam related comics because of the film. But how much more than usual? And they will look at all of that information. They'll have all that information. And that kind of information that is not available through selling paper to people. You can't get that. You can only get that through digital, and you get it in real time. They know how many people are on an app at any given moment. They know what comics they're reading. They know which ones are, not doing well, which ones are doing better than expected. They also could insert some advertising in there if they want to, or at least, this is a great opportunity for them. Sneaky Zaslav. This is a great opportunity for them. I don't know how many subscribers they have. I don't. Right? I just don't. But if they ultimately wound up with a few 100,000 or as many as 1 million, they could use this to promote upcoming films and to create more activity with upcoming films. They could also insert video in this with interviews with creators or actors or The Rock. The Rock could tell you to buy his Black Adam comic or whatever and create an extra buzz, some extra excitement that could then support the theatrical releases. But again, you can't do that with paper. So this is the one thing we really know is actually happening at DC Comics is that management's considered it, they've seen the numbers, and they've said, we're going to do a lot more with digital. And they're going to roll this out. They have this out now, and it's basically a 30-day delay on imprint comics. Prior to this announcement, it was 60 days. So you can get it at the comic store on the first of the month, and then a month later you'll have access to get the comic on the subscription service on their platform. As far as how this affects comic stores, plus or minus whatever, the comic stores still sell comics. They sell a lot of things other than just comics as well. They're toys, games, other things. But obviously, they're not that concerned about how it affects comic stores. They didn't even give comic stores a heads up about this, really. They just said, hey, we're doing it. And then they also offered to tell comic stores, look, for the next year, we'll let all your DC Comics be returnable in case we're stealing too many customers from you. But, you know, comic stores were great. They started basically in the 1970s. The direct market was a huge boom. They called it direct market, comic stores buying on a non-returnable basis rather than newsstands on a returnable basis. It became bigger in the 80s. It made independent publishing happen. You would never have seen an Image Comics if there wasn't comic stores. You wouldn't have seen Dark Horse Comics. I wouldn't have been able to publish G.I. Jackrabbits if there weren't comic stores. All of that came from that distribution channel. But that was in the 80s. You know, now it's crowdfunding. It's still paper, but also digital's generating money. Another thing's going on. I had no idea Webtoon was so big. You know, Marvel and DC are licensing Webtoon comics of their characters. And this is from Bleeding Fool. Great website. And they're talking about this in detail that, you know, their take on this story was just like, are DC and Marvel going to improve their approach to comics with Webtoon? The answer is no, probably. But eventually, Zaslav is going to see what happens from Black Adam. And then he's going to say, look, based on the success of Black Adam, we need consumers. Let's assume Black Adam does well. If it does badly, God knows what happens. Probably a massive number of layoffs at DC. But if it doesn't do well, if it does do well, probably less layoffs, but an instruction of saying, hey, look, I want my Black Adam fans, I want my Superman fans, I want the Justice Society of America, I want fans of our characters to get the same feeling, the same aesthetic that they have in the film. That's what I want. So focus on that, make that happen, get back to us. And let them go and try to do that. But to me, it's very interesting to know that they made this big push recently, and they made this decision about the direct-to-consumer digital platform. They're definitely doing it. And that also tells you, of course, they're going to be producing new comics. And maybe they do a license for manga versions of Superman somewhere. But that's not their main business. Their main business is going to be, yes, they're going to produce a lot of comics. And probably still periodical, even though I think they should switch to graphic novels, but I haven't seen all the numbers. Obviously, they have. And, you know, just Webtoon, this article's from ICV2 as well. It's a recent article. Apparently, they do $1 billion almost in global sales. I mean, you know, I've heard of Webtoon. I don't know a lot about Webtoon, but in 2021, they had global worldwide sales about $900 million. And they're expanding the business. And it's not just digital now. They're leveraging their digital content to go into print. And they've got all sorts of things that they're trying to do. However, you know, it's a big part of their business. And it's interesting to see that when you want to know, well, what are they going to do at DC Comics? Number one, they're going to make the films right. Number two, they're investing in digital. Number three is going to follow those two decisions realistically. Like, what are they going to do with the comics? What they do with the comics is going to match what they did with their first decision, the films, and their second decision, digital. And then number three is, you know, if you think that they're going to do a lot of social justice warrior comics and representation comics that people aren't really interested in reading, apparently, they're not. It's not going to continue that way. It can't. It doesn't make any business sense. All right, I do a lot of these videos based on Warner Bros. Discovery. I think it's very interesting because there are changes happening that are merit-based, that are focused on what consumers want. So I keep getting drawn back to doing videos about them. I've done like 50 videos on Warner Bros. Discovery in the last 6 weeks. So I'll put a link to the playlist if you want to check out some of these prior videos. They're pretty interesting, I think. I've got some great feedback. You guys have been great. Please be sure to subscribe to the channel. Click the bell for notifications. Give me a thumbs up when you like it. And I will see you again soon with another video. And if I don't see you, I will miss you.